Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm gonna do a video on my favorite movies of 2023. I am a little bit late. The holidays were kind of busy this year, and I also got sick twice, so that's why I'm kind of doing this a little bit late. Normally I would have done it before 2024 started, but here we are. Um, so I'm gonna go in backwards order from the lowest of my least favorite movies of the year to my absolute most favorite, just to make it a little bit suspenseful, I guess. Um, so I have a top six, not a top five, but a top six that I wanted to include on this list. All right, so I actually forgot a few movies in my original video, so I'm gonna be editing this in. But actually, on the last of my list, I am gonna throw it in here as one of my favorites of the year. It's John Wick Chapter 4, which was just a dope ass action movie. But it's on the bottom of my list just because I didn't like it as much as like some of the other John Wick movies. But it was a pretty good way to end the franchise if they do want to end it there. And it was like just jam packed with action and top notch action throughout. So I do want to include it here. Number six on my list is Creed 3, which I give a 9 out of 10. And that movie was kind of interesting because going into it, I was excited like before I had even seen any footage from it. But after I saw the first trailer, I actually got a little bit less excited for it. Um, and that was just because I wasn't sure from the footage that we saw in that trailer that it was gonna really live up to the first Creed, which is my favorite, and maybe even the second one, which I didn't like as much, but I still did really enjoy a lot. But actually watching the movie, I think it did deliver. Um, and I think I might have liked it more than the second one. I, don't quote me on that, but I think that's how I feel about it. And I think what drew me into it the most was the emotional side of it, which I was kind of surprised by. They did get into some emotional scenes in the movie, especially with the adversary, which I was one of the things I liked about the second one a lot. How we kind of got to see both sides of Adonis Creed and also Victor Drago in that movie. But in this one, there's actually like a personal connection between the two, and I really like that story and the way that they told it. And Jonathan Majors was a big standout for me in 2023, and he was the adversary who played Dame Anderson in Creed 3, and he did a really good job, I think, bringing some humanity to it, even though he was kind of a monster in that movie. But we kind of see why he turned into that. And yeah, I think it really delivered for me. So that's my number six. My number five was a bit of a surprise to me. Both of these movies so far have were on my list of like my most anticipated movies of 2023. Some of these are not, but these two were. Number five is Blue Beetle, which I was excited about just because it was gonna be the first Latin American superhero um, who has their own movie in Hollywood. The first big Latin American character that we saw was Namor in Wakanda Forever, but it wasn't his movie. He was just like the antagonist of it. But here we actually got to see Cholo Maridueña lead the movie as Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, and it was way better than I could have ever hoped. It was a super fun movie. Um, I wouldn't say it was like game changing or anything, but I thought it was really fucking cool with the way that they incorporated the Mexican culture as well as other aspects of the movie, like the score. I thought was really dope, and the action scenes, and I feel like the kind of nanotechnology of the scarab was really cool, and just all the visuals. So I really love that movie for that reason. Um, So that was also a 9. And then number 4 on my list is again a 9, but this one was not on my most anticipated list. I was looking forward to it, but I wasn't really sure going into it like how it would land with me. But I was pleasantly surprised that I not only like really liked it, but I actually loved this movie, and it was actually Barbie, which might be surprising to some people, but I thought the movie was super smart, and it what you can definitely classify it as a feminist movie, um, but I feel like it wasn't feminist to the point of like kind of like just straight up bashing all men. I thought it raised like some actually good points that all men should think about in the culture that we live in, being a male dominated culture in the US at least. Um, and and how even though Barbie as the toy and just as the icon is very loved by many people, the kind of image of Barbie has actually kind of ruined a lot of American culture when it comes to women or young girls, and they actually bring that up in the movie. So I thought that was really cool. And it's just a super fun movie, man. Um, the whole thing with the Ken side of it and all the Kens was really interesting, and I feel like the way that they came to a conclusion in that movie was really cool and like I said, smart. And I was also surprised by this movie as well, which also got me emotionally, which I was not expecting at all from this one. Like Creed 3 was a possibility, but Barbie I did not expect to be emotional. And I did get emotional in one part when they showed spoilers if you haven't seen it, the flashback with that one song. Um, and I think it was mostly the music that got me, but also like the visuals too, how it really shows kind of the reality of some relationships with a mother and their daughter kind of growing up and not no longer liking to do the things that they used to do when she was younger. So I thought that was really kind of powerful. And then third on my list, I'm actually gonna change from Elemental, um, which it, uh, which is next on the list, to actually a horror movie from Australia called Talk to Me. And that one will be I would rate a 9.5 out of 10. And that movie was fucking dope. Like it was super fucking creepy, but in the best possible way for a horror movie. And I really like the whole premise that like this artifact, this hand that they kind of grab on and like do some like ritual with is what kind of causes them to see people that have died. And then the main character's like story was really interesting and really kind of poignant and definitely relatable, I think. Um, and just the visuals of this movie were crazy, and the journey that it took. And I think it was kind of kind of like a perfect horror movie in my opinion. I don't think I had any really problems with it, which is why it's rated so high. So that would be my new number 4 on my list. Um, Number 3 on my list was also not on my most anticipated list. And I didn't really know also what to expect of this one. I was expecting, I think, even less than I was from Barbie, from this movie. And it was actually Pixar's newest movie that came out in 2023, Elemental. And I was like surprised by how much I love this movie. I think it might be one of my favorites, like top, maybe top 7 Pixar movies. Not quite top 5, I don't think, but definitely in the top 10. And this one is my first 9.5 out of 10. Like this movie was so good. The animation was really dope. The way that they incorporated all of the elements into the movie and having their own kind of unique movement set was really awesome with the water, the fire, um, even the kind of air that they had, like the clouds, was really cool. But at the core of this movie was the love story between Ember and Wade, which was the water element, but it would also had an immigrant story, which was really moving as well. And I think that's the part that like got me the most emotionally. And I actually did cry in this movie. I don't think I cried in any of the other movies that I've mentioned so far. I might have shed one tear in Creed, but definitely no tears came out in Barbie. But in Elemental, I actually fucking cried at the end of the movie. And I actually saw this one twice in theaters. Um, once with my nieces, and I think my nephew was there too. And I saw it once with my little brother who's 3 years old, and he loved the movie too. And I'm actually wearing a Ninja Turtle shirt right now. That was not one of my favorite movies of the year. But I also did watch that with my little brother, and he liked that one. But I don't think he liked it as much as Elemental. So this one was definitely like, in my opinion, one of the best animated movies of the year. And there's another one on my list that you'll hear shortly. But number two on my list was also a 9.5, and it was Scream 6. I absolutely loved this movie. I think it is actually like one of my favorite Scream movies. I don't know if I put it as my second or third favorite. I think it might be my third. I think Scream 1 and 2 are above it, but like Scream 2 and Scream 6 are like neck and neck for me. So this was also a 9.5 for me. I thought the reason why I liked it a lot was because of how actually kind of scary it was, which most of the Scream movies, if any, are not really scary. It's more kind of a campy horror movie where it it's like a kind of horror comedy, I feel like, because some of the killers just when they're wearing their suits, they're tripping around and stuff, and you could kind of laugh at them. But it's more that the kills that they do is kind of like cool or just brutal, which makes it kind of interesting. And then obviously the character of Sydney in the original four movies. But five, I was like, I enjoyed it, but it was kind of a disappointment for me. But this one, I actually feel like raised the bar, and Melissa Barrera as Sam Carpenter, like I think was also a big improvement in this one, which was another reason why I probably liked it a lot. And I actually did like the killer reveal in this one, and one thing about it actually surprised me, but you can hear more in my review for the movie. Um, and then now we are at my number one, which is another animated movie, the best animated movie of the year, and my favorite movie, I should say, of the year, which is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is a 10 out of 10 for me. Like, this movie was perfect. The only thing that I could say is a negative about it was that it didn't have an ending, because it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. But literally, from the beginning until that cliffhanger, fucking perfect for me. I had no problems with it. The music was fucking dope, both the score and the soundtrack. The soundtrack wasn't as good in my opinion as the first one, but the score was even better, and the soundtrack was still really good. And the animation was definitely improved over the first one, which was already amazing. But for me, Into the Spider Verse was a little bit overrated. Like I didn't see what a lot of other people saw in that movie, but this one, like I saw it, and I was like pleasantly surprised because this was on my most anticipated list of the year, but it wasn't at the very top. It was like maybe like three or something like that, or maybe even a little bit lower than that. But it delivered and then some. So I fucking loved it. I'm super excited for Beyond the Spider Verse. And this movie made Miles Morales my favorite Spider-Man of all time in any version of the character, whether it's Peter Parker, Miles Morales, live action, animated, whatever. Miles Morales in Across the Spider Verse or in the Spider Verse franchise was my favorite version of Spider Man. So this movie was dope. Um, I also want to add in a notable pick, which doesn't quite make my like favorite movies of the year, but it was really cool, and it's actually a foreign film, which was Toho's from straight from Japan, Godzilla minus one, which is actually the only Godzilla movie from Japan besides the original, I think, that I've seen. So there are others, but I haven't seen any of them. But this one I did see because I heard a lot of hype from it, so I wanted to check it out because I am a Godzilla fan. Um, and this one was dope. I definitely liked it more than the original Godzilla. Um, but I still think I prefer the American version slightly over this. But it's just probably because I am American and I just like the American way of creating movies, possibly. But this one had a really good human story, which the more recent Godzilla movies from the US have not had. So I really liked it for that reason. And also, Godzilla was actually like fucking terrifying in this movie. He was actually like a monster, which the American version isn't really. So I did like that variation um, from what I'm kind of used to. Um, so that was really cool. And the ending of this movie I was actually kind of emotional too. Um, but all the visuals were like spot on, and the scale was like really well done in this movie. Um, and just all the effects, like I feel like were very realistic in the way that it was, and the plan that the humans kind of used to kind of combat Godzilla was also a really smart plan, I think. So I liked it for that reason as well. And then another one of the best films of 2023 that I watched, but is not quite my one of my favorites. It would be actually right in between Talk to Me and Barbie. So better than Barbie, but not as good in my opinion as Talk to Me is Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. That one I rated a 9.25 out of 10. Um, so higher than Barbie's 9, but a little bit lower than Talk to Me's 9.5. And the only reason why I didn't include it as one of my favorites of the year is just because it's so damn kind of depressing and just like really serious that I don't really want to watch it again, even though it's a really good movie. Like I would watch it again, but I don't have the urge to watch it like something else that would be kind of more fun to watch. Because I wouldn't really describe it as like an enjoyable film, but it was a damn fucking good film, and I think one of Christopher Nolan's best. Um, I think like my top three Christopher Nolan films are Memento, which is number one, The Dark Knight probably at number two, and then I think Oppenheimer would be number three. So it was definitely really fucking good, and it didn't disappoint, and it was on my list of most anticipated films. But I forgot to mention it at the end of my other part of the video. Let's get back to the rest of the list. So that's it for my favorite movies of the year. But now I'm just gonna kind of rank the rest of the movies that I was anticipating in 2023, just from the best to the worst. So these were all on my most anticipated list, but didn't quite kind of deliver what I was hoping from them. Um, the first one on the rest of this list is actually a TV show, which is the Last of Us HBO series. It did kind of deliver pretty much what I wanted, but it wasn't one of my favorite things of the year just because it was pretty much a straight adaptation of the game, which I know very well that story, and I still think the video game version is slightly better, but it is still a 9 out of 10. Um, I feel like Pedro Pascal did a great job as Joel Miller, pretty much perfect in my opinion. And same thing I could say for Bella Ramsey as Ellie. The first like couple episodes maybe I wasn't quite sure, but after that I think she definitely nailed the character of Ellie, and it was quite emotional. And I actually want to see it again because I was interrupted in a couple of episodes by somebody else in my household. Um, so some of the emotional moments actually were kind of affected by other people that was also there when I was watching it, unfortunately. But I still thought it was really powerful and pretty spot on, and I can't wait for season two that adapts The Last of Us Part Two, which the game is also really amazing. All right, so the next one is also 9 out of 10, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, this one I really liked a lot, and the best part about it was definitely Rocket's story, and he was the core of the story. But the only thing that the reason why it didn't quite deliver what I was like hoping for is just because of how it had two different like time frames, and the present day time frame, what was going on then, I just didn't really care that much about, and I would have actually just preferred a straight up just Rocket movie. Um, and I think it might have been better if that's what it was. But I did like the ending, the way that they wrapped everything up and kind of sent their farewells to the Guardians. Um, so it was still really good. But I think I prefer both of the first two over this one. Um, and the next of these are actually just all Marvel projects. After Guardians, I think is Loki season two, which I would also give a 9 out of 10. And for pretty much the entire thing, I like really liked the show. The first episode was like had a really strong start. It had a bit of a dip, I think, but then it kind of got back up, and I think the climax was like episode five for me. But the finale, in my opinion, didn't quite hit the landing, and that's the only reason why I think it's a little bit lower than Guardians. But it was a really exciting season, and I liked seeing Victor Timely, also played by Jonathan Majors, as another version of Kang in this season, and he was really good as well. Then next is the Marvels, which I give an 8.7 out of 10. The only reason why I rate it like that is because it's not quite a 9, but it's higher than Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which is next on my list, which I gave that one an 8.5 out of 10. But I did like the Marvels more, so that's why I included it after Loki as an 8.7. And I really liked this movie because it was super fun. The action was really kind of unique and really creative, I think. And I really like the dynamic between the three leading stars of the Marvels, Miss Marvel, Iman Vellani, Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, and my previous favorite of the three, which was Monica Rambeau, as they didn't really give her a name in this movie, but I think she should be called Photon, since that was her mom's call sign as a pilot. But I think this movie actually made Miss Marvel my favorite out of the three. Previously, from the WandaVision series, I liked Monica the most. But here, definitely, I think Vellani really got to shine. Um, and the ending was really cool too. The way it's gonna kind of connect to the multiverse saga, which before, like at the very beginning of the promotion for this movie, I wasn't really expecting. I thought it was just gonna be its own kind of more cosmic side of the Marvel universe. But it actually did end up connecting, which unfortunately got leaked like right before the movie came out, so I did kind of know about that already. But it was still really cool to see in the movie. So now after that is Quantumania, which I was just disappointed with Kang's portrayal in this movie. Like Jonathan Majors did all he could to make Kang as cool as possible, but I think the writing kind of um, made him fall off a little bit, and just the way that they ended his kind of story in the movie, his part of it was disappointing. But I'm hoping to see. Well, I was hoping to see him return in a version that's very similar to that in the Kang Dynasty. But we now know that Jonathan Majors is no longer going to be Kang in the MCU because of his um, court case that he had. I don't know. He was found guilty of a couple of charges. So Marvel dropped him, unfortunately. I feel like because it wasn't like purposeful, like his charges were basically like accidentally harming somebody, like negligent kind of, um, and harassment. I think he was charged with. I don't think they should have dropped him for that because it wasn't really a serious charge. But I hope he at least continues to get work in the future, even if it's not going to be with Marvel, unfortunately. Because I was really looking forward to his continued career as King, but uh, it is what it is at this point. Um, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what they do. There are rumors of recasting, which I would much prefer than just dropping the character entirely. Um, so we'll see what happens. Um, but the next movie on my list, it was an 8 out of 10, and it was the Flash, which was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, but it really did not deliver what I was hoping it would. But I still did enjoy it a lot just because of how fun it was. It was a really fun movie, and the comedy I think was my favorite part of it, especially between the two Barrys, which unfortunately were played by Ezra Miller, who has more serious problems than Jonathan Majors does, and yet was not fired before this movie came out. But obviously, DC is going to be doing a reboot now, so he will no longer be the Flash going forward. Um, but yeah, the movie was pretty fun. I liked Michael Keaton in it, but his part wasn't like a really big hook for me. Um, and the whole multiverse stuff was kind of lackluster overall. Um, so yeah, and the next two are also DC movies. Shazam: Fury of the Gods is also an 8 out of 10. That one was really fun, but it was not really disappointing in any way, but also was not like surprisingly good in any way either, which is why it's so low. But I did have a good time, just not as much of a good time as the first one, and it didn't have the emotional hook that the first one had either. So that's why it's here. And then next is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, 7 out of 10 for me, because it really had nothing special at all. Where the first one, like the spectacle of the final battle was really awesome, and that was my favorite part of the first one, and actually elevated the first one to being like one of my favorite DC Extended Universe movies. I think top five. This one is like kind of way down on the bottom. The visuals were still mostly pretty cool, but the story was kind of lacking. Like it didn't have that kind of epic feeling that the first one had. And most of the cool visuals came from like um, kind of like hallucinations or like visions, and they weren't actually happening. So that's why it was kind of lame. And it just didn't really do anything to kind of end the DC extended universe on a good note, in my opinion. So yeah, it's kind of like whatever, pretty much. But even worse than Aquaman, and in my opinion, actually kind of bad. Which Aquaman I didn't think was bad. I just thought it was very, very, very mediocre. Was a Marvel project, surprisingly, and it was Secret Invasion, which for me was a 6 out of 10, which is not a good score. Like sevens are still decent, but anything lower is bad. And Secret Invasion was a 6 out of 10, mostly just because of the ending, because it had some really good stuff in it. Like Samuel L. Jackson did a really good job, and I really liked Don Cheadle in it. Even though spoilers, he was not playing Rhodey, he was playing a Skrull who was posed as Rhodey. But their dynamic with each other was, I think, the best part of the show. And there were some other cool characters introduced here, like Olivia Colman's Sonia Fallsworth. But it just kind of fell apart at the end, in my opinion. And it was just too goofy and like a worse version of a live action Dragon Ball Z at the end. And I prefer Marvel to be, even in its fantastical elements, grounded. But it just kind of became a cartoon at the end, and I didn't like it. So it kind of ruined the entire show for me. And I think it's my least favorite MCU project of all time. So I was super disappointed by it. But yeah, that's the last of my list. So let me know what you all thought about movies this year, and I'll be making a video on my most anticipated for 2024. If you want to get a heads up on that one, feel free to share your thoughts down below, what you're looking forward to. But if not, you could wait for my next video. Tell me there. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you for watching, and peace out.